Good evening all. Are we sitting comfortably? In that case, we shall begin this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Actions in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, it will be for real, and we'll evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase as appropriate to the high street and then into the car park. The meeting is being broadcast on the council's YouTube channel, where the recording will be available afterwards. Please use your microphone at all times and speak directly so that it picks up a good signal. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use their mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please do so discreetly and follow the chairman's example of setting them to silent. There are toilets on every floor of the building and an induction loop around this room. We'll be having a short break at 8 o'clock or thereabouts, according to progress of the meeting. Can we now introduce ourselves? I'm Dennis Willits, chairman of this committee, ward councillor for Lexton and Braeswick, and to my left, politically,
possibly, Councillor Kevin Bentley, and I'm the one of the ward members for Markstown Lair Ward.
Councillor Adam Fox, representing Old Heath, Hythe and Rowhedge.
Councillor Michelle Burrows, representing Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor David King, representing Mile End.
Gerard Oxford, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Chris Hayterson and St John's Ward.
and we are supported by officers. The Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Dan Gascoigne, Chief Operating Officer.
And our Committee Clerk.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
There are no substitutions, as far as I know, but there are changes to composition.
Chairman, just to let you know, Councillor Nissen has dialed in remotely, but for the purposes of the meeting, she's sent apologies this evening.
And also the Vice Chairman of the committee, Councillor Tate, has taken up the appointment of Chair of Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited. And of course, one of this evening's principal items is to scrutinise their four-year business plan. And she feels that there would be a conflict of interest if she was to continue as Vice Chairman or even as a member of this committee. So she is standing down from membership. And as I understand it, a replacement appointment has not yet been made. So we wish her well in her new role, and we'll be scrutinising her empire in a matter of moments. I'm not aware of any other changes. And should I expire during the course of the meeting, perhaps Councillor Bentley would take over as be Vice Chairman for the night and keep things going in my absence. Urgent items, Matthew has not advised me of any. Declarations of interest. Colleagues, do we have any declarations? Take it there are no declarations to be recorded. Minutes of the previous meeting on the 23rd of November. Is it your wish that I sign the record? Thank you. Have your say. Oh, I see no one champing at the bit to address us this evening. Which takes us on to the first substantial item, which is the report on Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited and their business plan for 22 to 26. The committee is asked to consider the report, to review the latest business plans and make recommendations to Cabinet, who will then seek to agree the new business plan formally at a future meeting. We have with us Andrew Tyrrell and Paul T. Smith, I think both via the telecommunications medium. And the objective, therefore, is to look at the business plan for the next 4 years and ensure that it is sound. The business plan is a summary of the achievements and the challenges for the future years. Prime interest is the updates from the annual report, which we've previously seen as considered by the committee. And of course, we congratulate CCHL on all the awards and achievements which they have won in past years. But today we look forward to hearing how they are going to continue with this high standard of performance for the next 4 years. Paul Smith, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Chair. With the Chair's approval, I would just like to ask Andrew Tyrrell to make an opening statement and just remind the members with regards to CCHL and this group of companies and the governance that exists. Andrew?
I can actually see that the portfolio holder for commercial is here tonight, so I didn't know if etiquette would allow for the portfolio holder to just say a few words before I introduce Paul. That's okay, Chair.
Yeah, super.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, a little bit of echo there, but just to say thank you once again to the officers for putting together these reports for you this evening. I will watch and listen to see for your comments, but thank you.
Can I mention at this point that the reports from CCHL contain some commercially confidential material, and much of the future plans are public money being spent on public projects. Therefore, we and the general public have a right to know about the generality, but there are some issues where, because CCHL is in competition with other organisations, it would give an unfair advantage if they knew of CCHL's detailed commercial plans, but CCHL doesn't know of their detailed commercial plans. So some of the information is commercially confidential, and if members wish to discuss or move into that particular territory, then we will suspend consideration of this item until later on, or perhaps exclude the public, seeing as there are very few of them here. But I just raised that as an issue that we should be mindful of. So if our colleagues from CCHL think that we're straying into territory which would put them at a disadvantage and we don't notice it, please point that out. But I will try and ensure, with the help of the committee clerk, that we draw the line in the right place. So back to the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so The CCHL business plan sets out the overarching strategy for all of the companies and details for the benefit of the public and for openness and transparency what our companies are up to and how this aligns with the council's strategic objectives. And then, as Councillor Willetts has just said, there is then a level of detail that expands on that in each of the individual subsidiary companies as to the actions of the energy company, the housing company and the trading company that goes into setting out our plans for the next 4 to 5 years. And obviously that is commercially sensitive, but we've given that level of public transparency in the CCHL business plan as usual. The report that you have before you also sets out the governance arrangements for the companies. And for the benefit of any members of the audience that are new to this and to any members of the public that are listening, the council's companies have just coming towards the end of their 4th trading year. So they've been operating since the 1st of April 2018, so far successfully. But obviously the last 2 years in particular have been impacted quite heavily by COVID. And we're now starting to see some of the early signs of recovery from that. I'm not going to say too much about that because one, it's set out in the report, but also Paul is here tonight with your chance to talk directly to the companies, and he's going to go into a presentation that expands on that report in pulling out some of the key headlines from this year in terms of the performance and some of the key headlines from the business plans as to the future. So that was all I was going to say, and then I was going to hand over to Paul for the main presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So Matthew, if you could launch the presentation for me, please. I've prepared a short presentation which helps to add and augment the report that's before the committee. The report is very full and it does give a very good indication as to what the companies have achieved in this current year of trading, and also what we're looking to complete in the next 4 years that links into the council's plan and its strategic priorities. So next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is our prediction in what we're going to financially support and provide and make available as a dividend to the council this year. You can see that our full year budget for this year, which was a COVID-related budget, was 111,769. And it's very pleasing to actually see that we have managed our cost base in line with some income fall off. And we're actually going to be slightly improving on our dividend delivery to the council of £150,000, which is very good trading and good management of our costs and income during what we've already heard has been a very difficult and trying year for the companies due to COVID. Next slide, please. So just a quick resume of various things that we have achieved. And when I say we, it is the companies in association with the council, because we must remember that we do work together, and this is very much the companies are utilising the council's funds and carrying out some of these activities, and some of the activities which cannot be undertaken by a local authority due to the Localism Act and the Local Government Act. So C&G Sports Park, we all know that has successfully opened up in May of last year. We had the women's soccer there, and the whole sports complex is extremely well received by the local residents. Next slide, please. C&G South, this is our next major expansion into North Colchester. We have been very successful in negotiating and finalising the Turnstone development. This is a £65 million project that is coming forward. And indeed, the first spade in the ground is going to be at the end of this month, if not the first week of February. And we will see the commencement of a 1.5 years of construction activity in delivering a significant part of the leisure complex. We've also completed what is called the Walk, which is the central boulevard, the walk area that goes right through the whole of the Northern Gateway. And we have built that in association with the heat network pipes and other ducting to make sure that we are really forward advancing the construction activity on that important development. And of course, we've got the St. Mark's Community Centre, which is going to be coming forward. Next slide, please. We've been very successful in a very difficult period of COVID, where we have maintained events and weddings in a COVID compliant way. We've been able to maintain some of our indoor events, and we must remember that the events activities of the companies within the trading company does really help to cross-subsidise the inception and the startup of our energy company and our homes company. And we can't undermine and actually forget the importance of the events company of what they have done and how they have secured work. And indeed, we've got a good, strong, growing calendar for events coming through in 2022. Next slide. Thank you. Helpline. Helpline has been an excellent performer. What we have seen is that throughout the entire pandemic, we have seen the continuous helpline service being carried out. We must remember that the helpline service is not purely just a monitoring, it is a monitoring and response. We are a frontline service. I'm very pleased with how our colleagues really work there. And also we have had volunteers coming forward during the various stages of the pandemic to assist us with the delivery of the helpline service. So that's an excellent service. Next slide, please. Moving on to our LFFN and CCTV, the local full fibre network, which is going to have the digital connection to Colchester, which is very important for the economic growth and commercial success in Colchester being a digital centre of excellence. That work is going to be complete on the 18th of February of this year, so only in a few weeks' time. And that's going to give us a great platform to move forward on the further digitisation in Colchester. We've also utilised that to increase the expanse of our CCTV. And many of you might be aware that we've now got a full digitised service within our CCTV, which gives us great information, great clarity, and is really helping our partners, namely the police, in making sure that Colchester is a safe place. Next slide, please. Moving on to the energy company. The energy company is fundamentally creating a network at Colchester Northern Gateway. And we've carried out all the boreholes, and we're now also moving forward and looking at a potential solar farm to augment the electrical supply to Northern Gateway to help deliver a more sustainable heat and electric supply. Next slide, please. Moving on to our homes company. Our homes company have completed their very first mixture of private and affordable housing. And we must remember that the homes company will always deliver 30% affordable housing. At no time, like national house builders, will our housing company seek to reduce the provision of affordable housing, which is a very important aspect in what our homes company is going to be providing to the borough. We've also completed a few of our garage sites, which are on the HRA, and that's been very successful. And we're moving forward with our designs and feasibility on new pipeline sites coming forward. Next slide, please. Now, just to give you a little bit of a forward look, we'll be looking at year one of our business plan period. Next slide. So moving forward with regard to the key priorities, looking forward to making sure that we are utilising the Section 106 funded community buildings. We're already underway at Stanwood and North Colchester, the rugby club. We're looking to make sure that our digital spaces are coming forward, and as we know that we are commencing that work on Queen Street to make sure that these growing spaces are coming forward, and very much working with our partners. And again, the delivery of the LFFN project to make sure that this gigabit service is available to our residents and to our businesses. Next slide, please. States and management. We have our estates and management managing all the commercial assets of the council. And they've done a very good job in making sure that we have been working with our tenants, our lessees, during the pandemic, working with the council and all the business associated grants, and really managing and making sure that we are empathetic at the same time as making sure that the council's income is coming forward. And post the lockdowns, post the release back, we have been successful in actually making sure that we're getting good rent roll coming back in through our asset management team. So they have done a very good job in managing the council's assets. Next slide, please. Events and weddings. We've mentioned that there are signs of improvement and coming out of COVID, and we are looking to continue a very good full programme of the events and the weddings. As I mentioned earlier, the events are really quite important to us with regard to the cross subsidies that our events business helps us to actually have a balanced business plan as we move forward. Next slide, please. Helpline. Helpline, we have got a very successful business there. We're moving forward on digital conversion. We're looking at this may augment the services that we can provide to our customers, looking to make sure that we do maintain our customer base with the quality of service that we can offer, and also looking to see if we can extend our service, but probably more on a monitoring basis, dependent upon how we choose to resource that and how we can actually create a business plan to support our concept of improving that business and its wider geographical coverage. Next slide, please. Our capital projects team, our team that manages all the major constructions. We've got an awful lot of coming forward. There's a potential town deal, which we all hope will be successful. We've got our own offices, our own house refurbishment works coming forward. We have the Northern Gateway, which we are going to be looking at and bringing forward, as well as various other works up there. And of course, the Queen Street Bus Depot and the St. Mark's Community Centre, and finishing off Stanwell Community Centre. Next slide, please. Then moving on to for energy. What we're looking at here is the installation of our energy centre, moving forward on the pre-construction services and starting to engage with the contractor to come forward with our energy centre and seeing that coming through in the next financial year. Also looking at the further feasibilities with regard to the microgrid, which is the solar park that I mentioned earlier, and also maintaining the expert advice that we provide to the council on sustainable energy and those strategic priorities around sustainable energy. Next slide, please. And then for homes, looking to progress our HRA sites. We act as a project manager and deliver those, finishing off a Military Road, which will complete in the first half of this calendar year. Looking to support the council in feasibility and viability for new pipeline sites that can be considered and brought forward. And obviously working with regard to any grants and looking so we can maximise any benefits with regard to our partner status with Homes England. Next slide, please. Now, we've had to look very much on what is happening and how we are moving forward. I'm aware, Chair, that we were asked to look at, so how can we look forward, how can we grow the businesses? And one of the issues that is facing the UK is the potential change with regard to the Department of Levelling Up and Housing Communities in how they're looking at how local authorities borrow money and how they should be potentially being requested to include a minimum revenue provision. So to make sure that local authorities don't restrict themselves financially in borrowing and expose themselves to undue risks. So that consultation period is going to conclude on the 8th of February, and the Colchester Borough Council is submitting its consultation response, because we need to make sure that there is not going to be coming forward any imposition that may stifle the delivery of homes, and also looking at other investments that the council wants to make in some of its activities, such as the heat network, where we have got established loan agreements for the heat network and also established loans for the housing company. And as much as we anticipate that there wouldn't be any retrospective changes, and indeed we have got to include some MRP calculations now anyway under existing guidelines, we feel really that we have got to be mindful of what may come forward. So we have borne that in mind with regard to our next 4-year business plan proposals and thoughts that are coming forward. We're also looking at how the market may change and monetary policies, how that might affect the ability for mortgages and household income receipts and what may actually happen. So there are some real changes that affect the thought process and the assumptions that we have used, and we have actually considered that within our business plans. So next slide, please. So having borne in mind the success of the company in this current financial year and what it is looking to deliver on this balanced portfolio that we have got between the energy company, the homes company, and the multidisciplinary business that we have in our trading company, we have come forward with this proposal, which you can see that for this current year, next financial year, we're looking at £250,000, £256,000 worth of net profit available for distribution. But then in this subsequent years, we're then starting to see the benefit of the housing being produced and sold at Northern Gateway. And we've been quite careful to make sure that we are not over-predicting or being too pessimistic. So in the year 22-23, we have not got any house sales in there, but it doesn't mean we're not going to be building. And indeed, in the last quarter, we are predicting that there will be some build coming forward. The legal completions, the creation of the properties, will start to flow in the year 23-24. And we feel that is very relevant to the process of obtaining planning and the intrinsic interconnection of what we have to do at Northern Gateway to deliver a comprehensive community with sustainable transport, with sustainable energy and heat coming through there. That is a very it's not prudent, it's not optimistic, it is a plan that's been well considered. And you can see how the growth in the anticipated dividends is flowing through the subsequent years. Next slide, please. So that really concludes my quick overview of the highlights, the intricacies of our business plans and the financial outcomes of those. So thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you very much for sharing the presentation. I'll defer back to yourself, Chair, to conduct and manage the questions and answers, please.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It was just a trifle light on what is going to happen towards 2026, but I suspect that is an inevitable consequence of the unknowns that there are, which could significantly impact onto Colchester Commercial Holdings. If I might start the questioning by mentioning 3 issues which the Governance Committee has raised in the past, and where one could argue that perhaps these matters should be referenced or explained in the business plan for the next 4 years. And those 3 issues were, firstly, the financial flexibility of the CCHL balance sheet, so that in addition to executing council projects, there would be an ability to engage in other profitable activities. This is a question which I think we've asked on 2 occasions, and I cannot see any dialogue in the business plan addressing the possibilities in this area. I don't know whether that's a purposeful omission or whether it's just not, there's nowhere to put it in the plan. The next issue, which we've discussed in the past and which I don't see explained in the business plan, is the question of the tax implications. Firstly, your last slide showed the impact of tax on turnover. If we look at the general contracting position of the council in regard to its other completely independent contractors, there is a move towards seeing greater social benefit or social payback associated with contracts, which inevitably reduces the apparent profitability of the activity and therefore reduces the tax that's payable. There is no mention about that trend in the business plan for 22 to 26. And there's also no reference to the tax on the payment of dividends. And I wonder whether this is an issue which you believe should be raised in your business plan, or whether it should be raised by CBC. But certainly I would have thought you should have been coaxing CBC into considering whether it is possible to come up with a much more advantageous tax regime for the activities which you intend to carry out on our behalf between 22 and 26. And the third area, which we've discussed before, is the range of activities which perhaps you might consider including in the plan for 22 to 26, which are currently not included. And as we discussed at the last meeting, the Localism Act 2011 enables local authorities to undertake activities designed to make a profit, but only if delivered within a trading company structure. And there are activities which are on the margin as to whether they are trading activities being undertaken for profit by CBC, which perhaps CBHL might have designs on to augment your portfolio. So if we could just deal with that, firstly, with that tranche of questions, and the extent to which they are answered or not answered in your business plan, which is up for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for those 3 very insightful questions. I'll deal with them in the same order that you've come forward with. With regard to the flexibility of the CCHL balance sheet, yes, at the previous Governance and Audit Committee, we discussed the potential of, is there an ability to retain dividends so that we could actually grow the balance sheet. With regard to discussions that we have had internally and the budget pressures on CBC and the medium-term financial forecast, it certainly would appear that for the next few years, that potential is not really going to be an option, where we do need to see the trading benefit from CCHL's group of companies really being repaid, distributed to the council as much as it can do to really help the council's MTFF. So we have discussed that internally with the CBC and ourselves, and very much looking at the MTFF. And really it was, we need to look at alternate measures and alternate ideas and business plans that could actually augment the growth of the CCHL group. And that then really led into this change from the levelling up and housing communities department. If we didn't have that regulation review coming forward, we would have come to this meeting with some further suggestions of ways that we could move forward. But really it was with that change and the lack of clarity in how the council can fund the companies and how we could move forward effectively, the decision was that we need to hold and wait for that decision to come out from the Department of Levelling Up and Housing Communities. With regard to the second question, Chair, with regard to the tax implications, our auditors for the companies, which is Scott and Bland, and also the auditors for the council, BDO, they have both raised the issues in great care of the company's trading, and they refer to the cost transfer. So they're very keen to make sure that there is nothing in the trading and the internal movement of costs, dividends and paybacks, where it could be any perception that there is an undervalue for the cost of transfer. So it's very clear that the ability for corporation the ability or the requirement to pay corporation tax is a direct result of successful trading. And indeed, we have got a concession agreement which removes TECL, which permits us to actually move forward to make sure that any of the internal activities that could be normally carried out by a local authority, if there is any surpluses from those, they are indeed then subject for corporation tax exemption. And we also have group relief. So our three companies, our trading companies, the energy, the homes and the trading company, we're offsetting losses from the energy company through its inception and startup to make sure that we are maximising the group relief to minimise corporation tax. So at the moment, Chair, I'm very happy that we are doing everything we can do within the regulations of cost transfers between a public body and its fully owned subsidiaries and group relief to make sure that we are not overly paying corporation tax. Then with regard to the third point, Chair, the range of activities that are undertaken that are commercial. It's again something that the council and ourselves are in close discussion about and consideration. And again, this is being held up to consider what is coming out from the levelling up and housing department to see what comes forward, what is the ability for the council to borrow and invest within its companies, to then really make sure that business proposals for any changes in other services within the council that could be considered, that there's then a real business plan behind it that can be delivered. So that's, I think, Chair, is hopefully a satisfactory answer to those three questions, but very happy to augment those answers further if you need. And my colleagues who are here, Andrew Tyrrell, I see that Mr. Cook, our Section 1 officer, is also here, if you care to ask them to explain any further details.
Well, might I thank you for those answers. It's certainly my view that that perhaps the business plan should touch on some of these issues, because I believe that they are particularly pertinent to the acceptability of the business plan. And we are here in a sort of unique position. We are not really CBC. We are the shareholder of this company, looking to see the best advantage for all concerned, and I certainly think that that the answers given are issues which are of interest to the business plan, and perhaps we can consider later on the extent to which we believe that explanations on these issues would actually materially help the business plan. My second question, having dispensed with things we've discussed before, is on the way the business plan addresses the unresolved risks. And you mentioned in particular the minimum revenue protection requirements, which may have a very significant impact on the business plan. Now, unfortunately, life is never simple, and we have to give our opinion on the next business plan, and it needs to go to cabinet before the matter of the MRP and its details are going to be clarified to the extent that we can make concrete predictions. But in the meantime, might I ask whether you think it would be prudent to have a section in the business plan on risk, financial risks, in particular unresolved financial risks, and perhaps some indication of what the various scenarios on MRP would have. Clearly, many of those impact on the directly on the council if we have to put into reserves a provision for, over time, a provision for any loans which are made to the company, regardless of where they come from. But that to me sounds like a very significant issue, and not to address that in some degree of detail in the business plan might be seen as an omission on which we should comment, although at the moment I'm not quite sure how we would actually do that, but you're the financial expert, not me. So could I ask for your views on the extent to which unresolved financial risks should be identified in the business plan for the next 4 years?
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with you. I toil between the commercial sensitivity of the activities that are undertaken and the awareness of getting information into the public realm with regards to our CCHL business plan. Very happy that the previous 3 items, the flexibility of the balance sheet, tax implications, and a range of activities, we could augment the committee report that is in front of the committee to include those matters if the committee so agrees, so that could be passed up to cabinet. With regard to the unresolved risks, again, yes, we could add a section in, because what we have done is that the anticipation of the change in potential MRP, minimum revenue payment provision, is to come into effect in the year 23-24. So in year 1 of the 4-year business plan, we have made sure that the budget can be delivered anyway that the decision comes forward from this consultation. And it is going to be in years 2, 3, and 4 where we've taken a prudent view with regard to how can this come forward. So what we can do is we can include more transparency in some of those assumptions that we have put through, Chair, to make that very transparent with regard to those assumptions. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that kind offer. I think it would improve the business plan if we were to have those assumptions for the energy projects and the housing projects, the 2 which are likely to be most affected by the minimum revenue protection provision regulations. So I'll add that to the list of issues which we might come back to consider suggesting changes later on. I'm hogging the floor rather. Are there any speakers? I see Councillor Bentley and Councillor King and Councillor Fox.
Well, Chair, thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure it's me, but I'm struggling to hear everything that Mr. Smith, who is speaking eloquently, it's not his issue, but I can't hear it very well. Fortunately, I could follow the presentation. I've read the papers. I wonder if we can try and improve the quality. I don't know what people watching the recording will hear, and I don't want them to miss what Mr. Smith is saying. However, I only have one question. I thought it was an excellent presentation. I commend Mr. Smith and the team on this. Looking at the profits, which look very healthy, I have to say, I just wondered, given the rising costs of living, particularly around materials, inflation, of course, is rising, whether that has been calculated into the predictions around the profit for the next 2 to 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bentley. Very nice to see you again. Yes, we have. We have taken on board the potential for material delays. So we've got time issues that have been built into, and also the cost issues that have been built in. We are seeing, and I am hearing from the sector and also from my professional body, that it is anticipated that in this end of this year, as long as we don't get another variant of COVID, that the expectation is that the production, the world production, will start to return back to some normality pre-COVID. So there are predictions that we have been utilising from the RICS, the DCIS, to make sure that we are, again, not being overly optimistic.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Bentley? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. To you and the team, like others, congratulations on getting through such a challenging year. I'd like, Chair, to go back to the structural issue that you touched on in terms of sort of scope and direction for the businesses, Paul. 2 or 3 years ago, still, as a new councillor, I was still hearing lots of people actually challenging whether we should have these companies and challenging also the relationships between them, whether they were clearly understood. The fact that I hear much less of that may just indicate the small, narrow world I have, or it may also be that we've got, and the public got more comfortable with this. We here certainly know the benefit of offering an alternative to the public that brings financial benefit and therefore social value to our residents for the services that profit from those companies helps. So I think that's fine. There is less noise, but can I have a view from you as to whether the company set up at the moment feels right and what might change or should? I said that gets us back into ranges of activities, but in a sort of structural way, I'll be grateful for a view on that. And just a second one for the moment would be about competitiveness. Judging the performance of the companies is difficult when you have such business flowing to you from the council. And I wonder if you could talk about how you judge how well you do, how truly commercial you are, which I think was part of the first question too. Chair, I've got others, but I'll come back to that later.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor King. So the 2 questions there on scope and direction. I think I'd just like to remind the committee that the companies were set up to undertake services that couldn't be undertaken by a local authority. And I can think of 3 that come to mind that are very pertinent. Our energy company, the actual assets, the boreholes, are going to be owned by the council, and indeed they are owned by the council. But the additional benefit there of the renewable heat incentive cannot be obtained by a public body or local authority. It needs to be obtained by a private company, in this case, our Colchester and Fore energy company, fully owned by the council. So that is a reason for that company to be set up. We then look at the pressure on the council, the financial pressure on the council, and the decision that was made that we could have housing being sold for a surplus, for a profit, and that benefit flowing back into the council, which is a very clear policy that the council undertook 4 years ago, because it's very nearly 4 years of trading. on the companies. And the other one is the LFFN, the full fibre network. So that full fibre network, it was the council who was able to facilitate the DCMS funding of £3.45 million to put in the basis of the digital cabling. But under the DCMS agreement, there is a requirement that is then got to be commercialised because basically this is the government through DCMS placing money to the public sector to facilitate growth on an open access digital platform. So again, that is a reason why we have the private companies. So when we come to look at the governance and the structure of those companies, we have got quite a wide-ranging activities where we are an inward-looking organisation that is supporting strategic priorities, that is utilising public sector funding, and therefore we are bound by public sector regulations. Then we have other activities where we can be more commercial, like our events business. Again, very successful, but that is pure commercialism. And indeed, we're actually moving forward and generating good surpluses there, rather than the event creations that we were doing in past years when it was with the council. So I do believe, purely on the grounds of how we have to operate and the services that we provide, the governance agreement that was put in place originally is still. Apologies for that. There must be somebody walking around outside. They're my little guard dogs. So I think it is fit for purpose for what we're doing now. I think when we look at further commercialisation, I think we've then got to look at how are we taking this forward, and then possibly reassessing our governance at that time. So I do think, Councillor King, at the present time, it is fit for purpose. When I then look at the competitiveness and how do we assess the performance of our companies, we have a baseline, and these services were being provided for, ones that could be provided for in the council. That's our baseline, and we can see how we are performing better than that with regard to some of the commercial aspects that we bring forward. But we have got to remember that we've got 3 companies, very diverse, and in some ways it's quite unique. And that's why the council, in association with us, won Entrepreneurial Council of the Year. Because when we were doing that presentation, Councillor King, we were making our representations, the judging panel was so intrigued by the fact that we had set up organisations, companies, that from year 1 were creating a positive return. And they hadn't seen that elsewhere in the country. And we have got very strong ability and desire to maintain the social provisions within our activities. So comparing what we do with pure private companies in the sector is very difficult. So the way that we have taken this forward is that we have KPIs, key performance indicators, which are important to the council in how we actually perform and make sure that we are delivering against those KPIs. And I think, again, as you've raised this, Councillor King, that when we do look at the future, when we get clarity from the Levelling Up department, and we see potentially, if the council wants to consider other commercial activities coming into the companies, or whatever commercial vehicle that the council wants to take that forward. Again, I think that we should be looking at, so how are we going to benchmark? How are we going to establish what we're doing? Because at the moment, we have KPIs, and then we have our dividend. We are judged very much on our dividend, and we've had discussions about, well, we don't want to pay too much corporation tax, but I've gone through that. And so I think that is an important consideration as our business develops with other activities, Councillor King.
I just want to apologise, Paul, that I drove you to stand on your dog. back to you for the moment. I handed it back to you, Chair. I've got other questions.
Yeah, but you finish your line of
move
questioning.
it round. Yeah.
Sorry, I'd expected a sort of further set of questions. I think it's fair to say that the companies are not CBC departments. They're not sort of lackey organisations. They must have their own aspirations as to what they're going to do in the world of competitive business. And I sort of strongly support what was being said there.
Well, let me make it plain. So do I. No, why wouldn't I? My point there is about the challenge and test should be about how much return there is, which actually, if I will go to the supplementary I was going to ask, would just be about that. We touched on profitability, Chair, and the group consolidated forecast is encouraging. Who wouldn't want to see the rate of return that's signalled here? My interest would be, given that the dividend assumptions are so much smaller, where the balance, unless I misunderstand this completely, where the balance runs, where it lies. So words about profitability and the direction and how it's applied, where it goes, I'll be interested in that. But I absolutely support this. Who wouldn't? I do. So do my colleagues, giving them the freest rein sensibly that we can. And to your point, Chair, about they're not a department, no, but they are our companies, and their future, their reputation and ours, they are enmeshed together.
But I would expect to see a degree of boldness in the business plan. And if necessary, it might well be the leader of the council reins them in a little bit, just as in any commercial organisation, the view of the customers who pay the bills eventually has a moderating effect on what a company might like to do. But that should not diminish the boldness, reasonable boldness that we should see shining through from this business plan about what the companies want to do, how they wish to help, how they wish to make the council more able to carry out services by making a contribution. So I think that's one of the issues that I would like to see, shining a real socket to us on what can be done and what can be delivered.
I'd love to see your ambition too. It's great.
Councillor Fox, you're next in line.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just on that point as well, I would, I think, agree wholeheartedly with you on that particular point. And I think it goes to the heart of the matter that we discussed previously with CCHL, which was around this flexibility that they've got and what they would do over the longer term. And I think what is particularly telling in these business plans is a short-termism, I'd say. Now, that might be because of the financial situation that the council now finds itself in, and saying, well, actually, we need that short-term profitability to come back into the council in order to help balance the books. But I think there's a opportunity cost potentially lost if we don't give the companies the flexibility and that long-term thinking that enables them to think beyond the projects that they've currently got in their sites. Because it feels to me like, having served on the first iteration of the board for the companies and seen that process go through, then having served in cabinet for this council, that exactly the same projects that were in place when these companies were set up are still the same projects being worked upon. And there isn't that long-term thinking. So there's a tertiary mention of garden communities in the business planning documents, but there isn't, what I would think should be, what are we learning at Northern Gateway in terms of energy provision that we can then apply to the garden communities? Now, it may well be some of that, initial work is going on, but if that garden community is going to start building houses, and I know there are arguments about link roads and whether that might be behind schedule too, then we want to be providing those homes with the most up-to-date heating and energy that we can provide to them, wanting to tackle the climate emergency. So I see that short-termism and that activity at the edge of the business plan perhaps not being as ambitious as it ought to be. And it sort of brings me to my first question, because I think there is some inconsistencies in the business planning process around Colchester and 4 Homes Limited, because it's not clear in the business plan whether 350 homes will be delivered by 2024 or 2025. And I wondered if we could get some clarity on that from the portfolio holder or from any of the officers.
I'm very happy to come in now, Chair, if you're happy with me to come in to Councillor Fox. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Fox. With regard to your last question, there is an obligation that we need to have the properties complete by July 2025, and that is what is currently predicted in our plan for the Colchester Northern Gateway. You are quite correct on all the items that you've mentioned there, and indeed, yes, when you look at what we call the pipeline of council-based assets that could be developed, they have been spoken about for a while. There are intricacies around those, and they are all being looked at, and we're very much aware with regard to the opportunities that exist for other development on council assets. And the plan, the objective is to make sure that we're utilising the land that is coming forward that the council wishes to see developed under this framework that we operate. And hopefully we can then actually see other opportunities coming forward for a housing company, because we really do understand that the housing company, one, it generates much needed affordable housing, 30% of the Section 106 housing, but then it is actually generating the financial returns that the council really wants to see coming through to augment its NTFF. And I would point to the events business, which is a true commercial activity. The events business is not funded by the council. The events business is completely now self-funding. So the income that we get in actually really manages and delivers everything that we do. And it really is a great net producer. And indeed, I can't mention it in open meeting, but we have, for the very first time this year, provided external services to another local authority, to 2 other local authorities. I'm very happy to mention those in a closed session because they don't want to be identified. So we are branching out in moving forward, albeit only on our events business, with regard to third-party out-of-borough activities. And I can tell the committee that what we have provided there has been exceptional, and we've had very high praise from those individual authorities. And one of the benefits that's been alerted to me by another chief executive of a nearby local authority is the desire to potentially come to the CCHL group of companies and utilize our services, because they immediately recognize that we can work within a local authority framework, a procurement framework, a local authority funding framework, and that we have got very much that public sector awareness ethos, that public sector ethos. So I really do see that there are opportunities that we can take forward. But so much of this is really going to be quite dependent upon how can we fund this moving forward, and what is central government looking to actually do with regard to the levelling up and the housing communities review process. And with regard to the energy company, obviously we know that Latimer is the master developer, and clearly we sit on the board there. We've got representatives from our council colleagues, the senior director sits on there, and they're very much aware of the services that we can offer. And indeed, that will be a discussion, but obviously that will then depend on the master planner, what they want to bring forward. I think I've covered your questions there, Councillor Fox. If I haven't, please do come back to me.
Thank you very much, Paul, and I really appreciate your answers, and appreciate that you are working in what is a challenging environment, and that in particular this consultation from central government on MRP is a bit of a roadblock to some of the house building plans as well. I wondered whether you might be able to talk a little to the energy market, because obviously, out there in the real world, people are really aware of the challenges that there are in terms of the domestic energy and heating market, and the impact that that's having on people's bills. Now, I would have thought that the energy system at the Northern Gateway project is just a type of investment that we want to be making, because it's a renewable source of heating that can provide some consistency, and because it's locally delivered as well. There's talk in the report about a microgrid and a new development with that, and I just wondered where you see the risks in terms of where the energy market is at the moment, and also but its impact on the project at Northern Gateway. Sorry, Paul, I think you've been on mute.
Yeah, sorry, it's schoolboy error. I do apologise for that. So thank you very much for that question, Councillor Fox. The energy market is definitely under strain. The national grid is going to be pressurised as the country transitions from fossil fuel into electric. We're looking for the decarbonisation of the national grid to help all of us with regard to the reduction of our carbon footprints. When I look at Colchester Northern Gateway, and I look at the provision of the heat network, so the provision of heat. Now, the provision of heat there is obviously coming from a deep source in the ground, from the aquifer there, and we've got this cycle system. Now, that is going to be something that we can deliver. There has got to be an economic return to the council, but our predictions is that going to be really quite cost effective, and it's something that we can control to our customers that are going to be there, Northern Gateway. It is also going to be an obligation, because every single property residential property is going to be connected to the heat network. Now, that means that our customers there can have that energy, that heat, that should actually be at a slightly reduced cost, as opposed to if they were to increase the use of their electricity, as well as using the air source heat pumps, which again is going to be utilising electricity. And one of the issues that is facing the electric market is the increase in electricity around the country, and the requirement to what is called reinforce the electric grid for distribution out to the primary and the substations. Now, that's millions, billions of pounds that is going to have to be found, and there is a possibility that there may well be unit price increase for the end user, which again puts up the cost. So if we can provide heat through our heat network system, we're then not going to be caught by that potential of a unit price increase. So that is really quite positive, plus also it is then reducing the carbon footprint, a strategic priority for the council. And when we look at the microgrid and the risks associated with that, not only do we have a microgrid, which is basically solar panels, and they can be ground-based, they can be roof-based. Roof-based has obviously got a higher capital investment, but that is going to be direct utilisation and creation of electricity. And again, what we can do is we can put that into a battery substation, so we can create battery storage. And indeed, that may well be more of a business plan coming forward, not only by us, but maybe by other developers who are looking at the inability of the national grid to provide the electricity consumption that is required locally. And indeed, over in Harwich, there is a planning application in for a battery substation. That's the first local one that I've actually heard of. So I can see that there is going to be quite a change, and I would predict that our heat network and the provision of our potential provision, subject to approval, of a microgrid can only help to reduce our carbon footprint and to give some form of control and cost benefit to the council in the provision that it would be providing to its customers. With regard to risk, modern technology, the solar panels that are used, the longevity of those panels, the lack of maintenance of those panels that you're now seeing in the marketplace now. The risk element to that is going to be quite low, but that would all be part and parcel of the business plan and the recommendations to the council for such an investment, if that is to come forward at all. I hope that answers Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's really good to hear. I think Andrew has his hand up, Chair.
If I may, I just wanted to add a non-financial element to that as well, because we've concentrated a lot on the economics and the financial benefits, but of course there are the social and the environmental value of the companies as well. And particularly in the microgrid, I just wanted to put it into some sort of context. So as you know, we declared a climate emergency in 2019, and we had the Pathway to Net Zero report from the Carbon Trust at that time. We've just had another Carbon Trust report done, actually, that was reported to the Environmental and Sustainability Panel last week. And the council's managed to reduce its carbon footprint estimate for 2030 quite significantly already. But at this moment, if we just rolled out the projects that are already underway or have been formally approved, we'd still have a carbon footprint of 2,700 tonnes of carbon. And to put the heat network and the microgrid into context, at the moment, the sort of microgrid that we're looking at would remove about 900 tonnes of carbon. So that's about a third of the remaining carbon that we need to offset between now and 2030. So it's a significant impact that has in terms of environmental benefit. So I just thought it was worth drawing that out for public attention as well, because it's not just the financial benefits.
Members of the committee who've not yet addressed any questions. Councillor Oxford, do I see you indicating?
Thank you, Chair. My questions are probably going to be fairly mundane in comparison to those before me. But on page 84, it talks about lettings of this building and others. And we've had occasions when the council have tried to book meetings for the council and had difficulty doing so because the rooms have been booked out. And I just worry that if we allow this to continue, the council business would not be able to carry on properly. There's one other thing, if I may, in relation to the old library, the previous platform lift that gained disabled access to that had to be replaced in fairly short number of years. One of the issues that I've heard from others with similar lifts is because they're not covered. Now I wondered, I know it's a listed building, but I wondered whether some form of formal metal or whatever covering could be go there, because it takes ages to go up in the lift. Whoever's on it can get soaked to the skin while others just step in through the door. But also it protects all the workings of the lift from needing to be replaced much sooner. So I just wondered if those sorts of things could be considered moving forward. But the one main thing is that we need to be able to book for the council's business meetings without having to worry about whether somebody else has got a, I don't know, what sort of knees up here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oxford, sorry, Chair, did you, sorry,
I just wonder whether this is an issue which needs addressing in the business plan for 22-26, Councillor Oxford, or whether this is a sort of a practical matter which we should be sorting out amongst ourselves in a sensible way to ensure that the buildings are available.
I think it needs to go into the business plan because it's the problem's escalating. We recently needed to find a room, namely the Moot Hall in this instance, and I think 4 or 5 dates from my memory we couldn't get. And so it is a problem that's escalating, and therefore it needs to be taken serious, because otherwise it affects the running of the council and its business.
Absolutely, but it's a sort of judgment of Solomon whether to accept a really lucrative fee from an outside booking and move the council down to the bus shelter, or whether to turn down the fee. And from an Amphora point of view, I guess there will probably be a bit of bias to ensuring that they meet their business plan, unless we can match the fees being offered by other organisations booking accommodation. I think it is an operational issue which needs sorting. But I'm not quite sure the extent to which it needs to feature in the business plan. Whereas your first
Chairman,
question...
sorry, if I may, with this, yes, we could move a meeting, but it has to be moved to a venue that is fully accessible so everybody can take part, whether it's Leslie, whether it's myself, whether it's anybody. And that's not always the case, because we're not allowed to do hybrid meetings anymore, because otherwise that would get round it, because if there was a problem with a venue, you could take part in the meeting by hybrid and still vote. But we're not allowed to do that unless government changes its opinion on that. So it is important that everybody can actually get into a venue and we can carry out our business, as well as letting it on all other occasions to maximise income. But they just need to be working better together. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think your first question certainly deserves an answer, and it should all. I think it's already mentioned to a certain extent in the business plan, and that is the extent to which Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited's activities take cognizance of the needs, the special needs of the disabled, and it would be useful just to hear a word on that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Oxford. You're quite correct that we are cognizant of the needs of everybody. And I am aware, Councillor Oxford, that there has been a few occasions where we have given way to a council meeting, and we have gone back to the booking and cancelled the booking because there's been no other alternative. So I think that we are aware of the issues where we are using the council property, namely the town hall, the castle as well. And we have given way, but we may just have to think about that a little bit more. And I think you're quite correct that we need to make sure that council business is carried out in a venue that is accessible to all. And I think we've possibly been doing that by giving way on a few of our booked events. But I will research that more and make sure that we are comfortable with how we're meeting that challenge.
Chief Operating Officer, have we got the balance right on this one?
Thanks, Chairman. I think the balance is probably about right, but I think the question's valid in terms of the growth of the companies and future projections and demand on venue space. We do have a separate hire agreement between the company and the council, which deals with the operational matters that Councillor Oxford's inquiring about. But I think, I'm grateful to Paul Smith for agreeing to look at it going forward.
Thank you. Any further questions, particularly from members who haven't addressed questions yet? Any repeat questions from the recidivists who always hog the limelight? No. I have one final question before we consider what we're going to do, and that concerns what I perceive, and of course my perception may well be wrong or inappropriate, but there does seem to be considerable overlap and duplication between the activities of CBC and CCHL. And one could argue that this is perhaps necessary because we work closely with, we're all friends, we work closely together. But I wonder what extent we could rationalize and ensure that duplication of activities is reduced to improve the profitability of CCHL and of course to keep our eye on our own internal costs.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have got the governance requirements under the governance agreement, and that lays out the liaison and the activities between CBC and CCHL. And as you were raising that question, I was just trying to think if immediately I felt that there was any significant overlaps with regard to what is carried out by CCHL and how that relates to any of the activities of CBC. None immediately sprung to my mind, but it is certainly something that we want to take forward because with myself now being the managing director of CCHL, we're looking very much at the structure of CCHL as a group of companies, looking how that structure will create resilience in its operating activities and succession planning as well, to make sure that we have that there. And I think during that process, which is going to be undertaken over the next couple of months, because I need to get that in place quite quickly and probably correspond that to the formal change of the chief executive of the council, to make sure that we do have a structure that is fit for purpose and how that interrelates with our CBC colleagues. So I think that's how I would answer that question to you, Chair, and that it is something that we are looking at and reviewing and want to actually create a resilient structure within CCHL fairly quickly.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Points to investigate. Right. In that case, we've had over an hour on this particular issue, and we need to take a view on whether we believe that there are any additions, clarifications, alterations that need to be made to the business plan before it goes to Cabinet in March. None of the issues that I think we've discussed are showstoppers where we would say this plan is unsound and should not go to Cabinet in March, but nevertheless, many of the questions asked are pertinent, and I think it's really down to CCHL as to whether they wish to consider whether the business plan would be better if they were to perhaps add some notes, further clarifications on the issues that we have raised. And if I can just go through those issues and check that my colleagues are happy that they are the sort of the principal issues where we think clarification could be useful. They are firstly the financial flexibility of the balance sheet, secondly the tax implications, thirdly the additional activities which could be envisaged in the business plan arising from the need to ensure profit-making activities or in a trading company. The next point was the unresolved financial risks and the assumptions, particularly in regard to MRP on the two major projects which require capital of energy and housing. The fifth point was the impact on inflation on the four-year business plan. The sixth point was competitiveness, boldness, particularly in the energy market. And the seventh point, which was the one we've just discussed, the issue of overlaps and duplications, and whether the business plan can be improved by seeking to carry out any rationalisations. Is that a reasonable consensus of the issues that we have discussed, and which we commend to the company to consider whether the business plan would be improved by giving further consideration to those issues? Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to labour my point too much, but there are inconsistencies in the reports around whether 350 homes will be delivered by 2024 or 2025. And the verbal response from Paul Smith was that they had until July 2025 to deliver the 350 homes. And so I think the company ought to be clear about when it expects to deliver those for the council.
Sorry about that omission on my part when documenting. Yes, so we have point 8, which is clarification on the delivery of the homes programme, and to which a certain extent will probably impact on unresolved risks. I mean, these are all issues which are to a certain extent interrelated. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the list. That ambition point included. I think that's helpful to the company, be helpful to the reader. There's just one other point. The great work that the companies do and their independence and flexibility we talked about, they're designed to go out and be commercial. That's what we want them to do, but go make money, go do God. But on the last point about doing good, we were rightly reminded of the impact they can make for the objectives we have as a council, whether it's carbon reduction or social value. And I wondered if we might encourage the company when they draw up their final business plan to perhaps draw more of that messaging out. That is good placement of them in the marketplace, actually, that they have that kind of attitude. And there are some facts there that they might want to place a bit more emphasis upon. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that does fit into item 2, tax implications on turnover and dividends, and the question of social benefits, social payback, in line with our expectation from other contractors, is a material consideration. So we can include that under that point. So we have 8 points now where we believe the business plan could be clarified, but of course it is the judgment, I think, of the company as to whether they wish to modify the business plan to take into account the issues that the shareholder has raised, as is the case with any shareholder meeting. Councillor Bentley.
Well, thank you, Chair. Of course, these points we can send back to the company, but there's no harm in us sending a note to the Cabinet of these points that we would ask them to address and look at when the presentation is made. And certainly I concur that any policy this council has deemed fit, and certainly passed as motions in some cases, particularly around climate change, that any organisation working for or with us should adhere to. And I mean everyone, not just some, but everyone should adhere to those policies, otherwise the policy becomes pointless.
Yes, and it's down to us to ensure that such matters are recorded in the SLAs, to ensure that the company knows precisely what we as customer, as opposed to shareholder, expect of the standard, quality and ethics of their delivery of service. But yes, we will document then. Matthew, are you in a position to document our 8 points with a bit of help from our notes, so that we have an aid memoir which we can pass on to Cabinet and and also to the company if they wish to see it in our handwriting rather than theirs. So is that generally agreeable? Before closing the issue, can I go back to the portfolio holder just for a view on what we are proposing to do?
Well, thank you all for your comments tonight. Thank you again to the officers for pulling this report and reporting to us this evening. I look forward to having this issue come up at Cabinet.
Good, thank you for your endorsement of our approach. We've had a good discussion. Can I thank our colleagues at Colchester Commercial Holdings, Andrew and Paul. We've bowled a lot of questions at you which were unnotified, and I certainly have been impressed with the quality of the answers, the understanding you have of the customer needs, and I found it a very interesting experience to go through the business plan and fully understand the issues contained therein. So thank you for helping us this evening, and you will be getting a copy of our note of what we think it is that could improve the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We now move forward to item 8, the external audit update and the new arrangements, which you'll find on page 87 of the report. Here we have Paul Cook, our head of finance, Aphrodite Leverve, and Francesca Palmer, both from BDO, who will be explaining the revised arrangements to us. And of course, this has been a matter on which the committee has particular concern, and we have written letters to the department, to the ministers concerned, and I think we continue to have genuine worries about the slowness of this process. We understand many of the reasons, but we still feel that our officers did a marvellous job in ensuring that all our data was ready for inspection and audit according to the timetable. And we feel particularly disappointed that the audit has not been able to be completed within the timescales, albeit that there are issues that have been explained to us on a couple of occasions. Paul Cook, as head of finance, are you going to lead off on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run quickly through the report, and then with your indulgence, we can bring in Francesca to comment on current progress on the audit. So we had hoped to come to this committee with the audit opinion, but that hasn't been possible. So we're still working quite intensively with BDO to be able to come to the March meeting. That would be the audit opinion. But then, of course, the use of resources judgment would follow on up to 3 months later, and we can talk about that with Francesca. Just looking in section 7, these are proposed changes to the external audit regime that were announced at the same time as the local government finance settlement. So in the table under 7.1, the first element, improved guidance for audit firms. Fine. There is extra funding allocated, 45 million nationally, to help local bodies with their accounts preparation, but I rather suspect most of that will be used up to pay additional audit fees. And then CITFA have been asked to issue guidance to simplify the accounts. And that would help us because the sooner we can reduce the workload, the better it will be for finishing the audit. There is also a suggestion that audit committee arrangements should be revised, including the requirement for an independent member. As soon as that consultation is available, we'll bring it forward to the committee. And I also note, Chair, a targeted training programme for audit committee chairs. There we are. So on accounting and audit requirements, there is some work by SITFA to try and simplify the presentation of the financial statements, which I think is long overdue. So we certainly welcome that. And those long-term changes may be brought in for 21-22 as an urgent measure. And then there's some suggestion about improving public sector audit appointments procurement process, and most importantly, extending the deadline for publishing with opinion for 21-2 accounts to the end of November, and then going back to a 30th September date for the next 5 years. So in the second table, we can see that before COVID hit in 1819, we were publishing with opinion by the end of July. The current year, because of the difficulties in delivering the audit, we may be publishing in the following March. And then for 21-22, we would expect to be able to publish no earlier than the 30th of November. And then for the next 5 years after that, back to 30th September. So what in 1819 appeared to be a bit of a new era of actually publishing local accounts more quickly, which is great for local accountability, seems to have gone a bit awry, and we can only hope that in the longer term we can get back to a satisfactory situation. So any consultations that come out, we'll bring forward to the committee. I think with your indulgence, Chair, perhaps we could ask Francesca to comment on rounding off the 2021 audits and any comments she has on the external audit changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Certainly, let's hear from the auditor.
Thank you. So can I start by giving Aphrodite's apologies? Unfortunately, she's ill tonight, so can't be here. As the committee are aware, there have been a number of challenges delivering audits over the last 2 years, with very few audits actually signed by the September deadline this year. We've struggled both on a national basis as national shortage of audit staff, and we're struggling with a net loss of qualified staff. And we've also had specific issues this year with your audit. We have had a member of staff fail their exams, having to take additional unplanned leave. The audit senior that was initially allocated to this audit has left, and the second audit senior we'd planned to use on the audit applied for and was successful in obtaining employment with the council. So again, all these things are fed into our resourcing pressures, which when we're struggling to begin with make it significantly more challenging. We've also struggled with both us and the council having people off sick with COVID, resulting in audit queries not being able to be processed because then the timetable slipped. It's then slides into budgeting for you. So there's it's a cumulative effect. We have made a lot of progress. We were hoping to be finished by now, as Paul Zalut said, and we're now aiming for the March committee dates. I'm happy to take any questions that people have got.
Yeah, I just reiterate my disappointment. We've all been affected by COVID. I mean, every organisation in the country has been affected by COVID in some way or another. Our finance department has been affected by COVID, but they still managed to get all the data ready for audit virtually on time. And one wonders why it is. I mean, that one group of accountants, although they're affected to a certain extent by COVID, managed to get the work done. But then the next group of accountants who should be concluding the audit are significantly worse hit than the CBC finance department. And this is what I don't understand. In the great scheme of things, if one team can do it, why cannot another team do it? Or is it just that the external audit is that much more fragile as a process than we have established within the councils themselves, and perhaps there should be some audit lessons learned in the other direction.
I think I alluded to the fact we have got, there is a shortage of experienced public sector auditors in this country at the moment. All the firms are struggling to get audits delivered on time. And it is we are a finite resource. We got behind last year and we're struggling to catch back up again as a result of delays last year have impacted on this year.
Colleagues, do we have any views on what we've heard, other than disappointment? Councillor Bentley.
Chair, I hear this, and I just think, so that's it, we just accept that, that's okay. That's a general comment by me, because I don't think it is on behalf of the taxpayer, which we all sit and represent, that isn't okay. I don't know if it's just BDO, there are other companies involved, whether they're in the same position, I don't know. I just wonder whether we could ask our colleague from BDO, we're one council in the East of England. How many in the East of England are in the same position with the work you do with BDO and them? Is it just us, or are there others? I should declare the interest of Essex County Council, so I know that's an issue too. So that's two, I can say straight away. And again, the County Council has done exactly the same thing and all the work's been done. So can you first of all just let me know how many authorities in the East of England that you work for in the same position, please? I
haven't got exact numbers. I'm not sure whether anything has now been signed, but certainly almost all were not signed before Christmas. As at the end of September, when PSA, who are the appointing authority, published numbers, 9% of councils' accounts have been audited.
So thank you. Okay, I'm sure we can find out. I'm sure our colleagues thank you. I'm sure our colleagues in our own department can find that out and see where we fit into the scheme of things. And I know that some councils have reached the deadline, but we're one that's very efficient here at Colchester Borough Council. We have some excellent officers. So I guess my comment really to the committee via you, Chair, is you have written and you've had replies for what they're worth from various people. I just think, do we accept this on behalf of the taxpayer in Colchester who pay their council tax, and therefore their council tax is part of this fee that will be paid? Do we just accept that, or do we offer some sort of statement that expresses on behalf of the taxpayer that this is not acceptable, and that next year we may be looking to the government to change things? Because if we keep going on like this, we're going to end up with accounts not being audited and stacking up. And in the commercial world, that simply would not be allowed. This is people's money we are talking about here, and it's a reflection on us as well and the great work by officers. And I just feel quite incensed by it. Perhaps I'm alone in feeling incensed, but I feel incensed by it, and I think there should be some sort of comment about that, Chairman.
Councillor King.
I'd just like to endorse the remarks just made. To our BDO colleague, this will sound easy to say, but it's not personal. You'll be having other calls like this, and they will be uncomfortable on a personal basis. None of us would want that. But I do want to be very clear, and my colleagues, I'm sure, will feel the same. If you haven't got it, you need to pass back the message to your senior leadership in the most emphatic terms. This is a disgrace, and it's not one of our making. It's not of our officers' making. And there is a feeling, it may be wrong, that we're being rather gouged here, that it's all a little convenient to the industry as a whole, to have a problem or a set of problems that lead them to a position of higher rates of return and profitability. So, this is not good enough. We need you to get that, take that back.
Yeah.
So I absolutely do endorse the words of Councillor Bentley, and I know, Chair, your sentiments. We've had this conversation here before. And for the record, again, just add our appreciation for our finance team for doing so much good work so early. There's a real issue here for us, actually, which is that the longer and later the accounts are, not for, we hope, a well-run local authority like this, but there are some who have more struggles. The risk is that one does not find out what matters until too late. We delay the process of finding out in a local authority what needs to be resolved and what needs to be addressed. So this is a structural issue. We should tell the government, we should not make it easy for them either, because they've got a duty with the industry to extract the best from them. And I too could really go on about it. Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
I'm happy to endorse what Councillor Bentley and Councillor King have also said, and to demonstrate some cross-party unity on this this topic in particular. We've laid out our frustrations before, and as you said, we've written to the powers that be as well. I mean, one of the things that strikes me and this isn't personal to BDO, this is to all the firms that are undertaking audit work, is that if it's not possible to achieve the audit work for the sums that are available to do it, and with the resources that the industry has, then they need to be going back and saying that this isn't a tenable situation either, and there comes a point at which private companies need to say to themselves that they're not going to bid for this work if it's not possible to achieve it, because no doubt it's having a detrimental effect on their status and the eyes in which people see these firms as well. I kind of feel we can put on record all of these words about failures with the system, but it really is down to the government to try and help sort this out for local government, so that we don't find ourselves in this position in years to come. Because all it feels like at the moment to me is that we'll be sat here again next year, and we'll be sat here again the year after that, and the year after that. And I'm sure that bodies like the LGA and others are making these representations to government as well. But as Councillor Bentley said, the taxpayer is being failed on this point, and sometimes you need to put a little bit of extra resource into the system if it needs it to make sure that we can demonstrate that our accounts are audited properly and that we're demonstrating good governance. And if that's so be it, then the government need to change the system so that it reflects that. Thank you, Chair.
It's quite clear to me that the system is broken and needs fixing, and I'm not sure that the recommendations which are rippled down to us are going to fix the problem in the short term. What we want is an experienced team of auditors who know their way about local government, getting on with the job in sufficiently plentiful number to make the system work. And that is not what's happening at the moment with the monopoly of 4 organisations. Now, as a Tory, of course, I would advocate that the audit should be put out to all the local firms, and let's have a bit of local competition. And I'm sure Councillor Fox would suggest that we set up a national audit company where government can direct just what performance standards are to be used. So there are a range of possibilities, but the one that just doesn't seem to work at the moment is this monopoly of 4 companies, which seem to be under no compulsion to actually do the work to quality and time. So I feel feel another letter, I don't know whether writing letters actually has any value at all, but I just feel that the only way I can make a positive contribution, other than having a resolution here which does absolutely nothing, is to have a resolution which says we will write yet again expressing our opinion to the Prime Minister or the Chancellor or whoever that this system has got to change, and it's got to change more radically than the suggested list of bureaucratic changes which are presented to us this evening. Councillor Bentley, you wish to stop me in mid-flow?
No, I would never dare stop you mid-flow, Chair. Look, just as a way of putting full stop to this, because I absolutely understand that we can pass a resolution and who cares, but it will sit on the books of this authority forevermore if we do. And I think that is important to put a marker down. So my view, and let's see what colleagues think about this in the recommendations, if you don't just simply do what the recommendation says, yes, we'll approve them, and yes, we'll note, but I would go further and say, first of all, noting and praising the work of our staff at this authority for what they have done, but extreme disappointment and little faith that our external auditors can deliver on what they've done given past examples. Now, whatever you think of that, it may just disappear in the annals of time, but it will always be there in the annals of time, and people will know how I think we've been badly let down. We, the people, have been badly let down by somebody that's been given to us. And this is not a personal comment, as Councillor King said, she doesn't take it personally, but it is important this message is passed back very clearly. And I think I want to hear sorry, and I don't think I've heard that yet properly.
So Councillor Bentley has proposed that we adopt a two-part resolution. Firstly, praising our staff. I think the exact wording was captured by Matthew. And secondly, expressing our disappointment. Are we going to tell anyone? Are we going to write to the Minister yet again? I think we should continue to say just how disappointed we are with the first of all with the situation, and secondly with the process and the changes which are suggested, which are of a bureaucratic nature and unlikely to lead to significant improvements in the short term.
Chair, could I just recommend? I think yes. I think what I would do is write to the Minister with this resolution, and also send it to the Chair of the LGA as well.
So the Minister and the LGA. Councillor Lissimore, yes, sorry, I'm looking the other way, so I don't see hands come up. But yes, Councillor Lissimore, please.
I just wanted to endorse what has just been said. An excellent idea from Councillor Bentley. I would be very happy to add, obviously, my name as well as the committee's name to any letter. And again, you know, to thank our own officers who have had everything sorted, got everything ready. You know, this isn't acceptable. So thank you all again for your discussions, and happy with that conclusion tonight.
Thank you. I wonder if we could add as well, if we're writing to the Minister, to turn around and say that we're very disappointed as local government that we can't achieve the normal high standards because of the external firms, and there's no way we want to become like the EU, who don't do their accounts in time.
Or never. Councillor Hayter.
Yes, I'd just like to add, obviously I'd support everything our colleagues have said here this evening. It's easy to forget that we're kind of over a barrel as well with our options we've got. And I think they need to be reminded that in a commercial world, actually, we would have moved them on. We would have found it unacceptable, and you would go elsewhere. And I do feel like we've been taken advantage of as a whole, and it's obviously not just Colchester Borough as well. And again, I'd like to back up that the colleagues here that have done all the work, it's not great for those guys. They've worked so hard, and yeah, are suffering for that. So I think, you know, we need to reiterate that in the real world, in the commercial world, it wouldn't be acceptable. We'd be moving it on. We'd be wanting discounts, all sorts, and we need to remind this that that's the process elsewhere.
Dan, Chief Operating Officer, you wish to just advise us on etiquette, perhaps?
No, I wouldn't do that, Chairman. No, just thank you for the comments from the committee. First of all, in relation to our own officers, I think they have done an outstanding job to get the accounts in good shape early last year. So it is really disappointing for the team that we're not able to see this concluded still. What I was going to mention is that we have, by coincidence, received today a letter from Catherine Francis, Director General of Local Government Strategy Analysis at DLUC, which I thought I would just mention because it's relevant to the discussion that we've been having, that the committee's been having. I'll just mention a couple of things in the letter which I think are relevant. One is that, first of all, Catherine Francis outlines that the fact that timely completion of local audit is a vital transparency method for the taxpayer and for sustaining public confidence in local democracy more broadly, which I think from the discussion we've had, we'd all wholeheartedly agree with that. What it goes on to talk about is some of the measures that the department is delighted to announce that they've taken to deal with the problem. And I think the point for me is that the measures listed reflect largely some of the measures you've seen in the report this evening and don't seem to get to the heart of the difficulties that are systemic difficulties as have been discussed. So I just wanted to mention that. It's a letter that's been received by the Chief Executive and indeed addressed to our Section 151 officer. So it might be that, as well as the letter you're talking about to a minister, we might do an officer response to the Director General at DLUC at the same time.
Thank you for that suggestion, which is most welcomed, and I think we'll do that as you wish. So I hope this discussion has summarised the view that we have on the audit process. And while we understand the difficulties that BDO have experienced, and to a certain extent we sympathise with them, we just find it unacceptable in business terms for our audit to be delayed in this particular way. Are there any final observations from BDO?
Sorry, let's get myself off mute. No, I mean, I think I've set out that we've had issues, that it's not specific to Colchester, is not a position any of us want to be in. And we are working to try and resolve them. So yes, I think that's really all I can say.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening, and I think you gather just what strong opinions we have on this particular mess. And we will be writing to the minister, and we will send you a copy of the correspondence that will be sent. Yeah. And we look forward to the eventual sign-off on the 22nd of March. If we're not in lockdown, perhaps we'll have a party on business premises, if that's permitted. But it will be a red letter day when we finally get the accounts signed off. So with that, can I close this item and thank the auditor for listening to our opinion this evening. Thank you. It is 8 o'clock. I'm happy to continue, but if anyone wishes to have a break, do signify now. Yes, okay, we're having a 5-minute break. We recommence at, well, 7-minute break, recommence at, my clock is very different from the Moot Hall clock. But start timing 7 minutes from now. Councillor Oxford has left the building, I understand. And I think one or two more of us might well be going in the next few moments if it doesn't get more exciting. There we are. But the opportunity is there for excitement. We're now on to item 9, the interim review of the annual government statement on page 93. Where Hayley McGrath, our Corporate Governance Manager, will be explaining the 2 points that are outstanding.
Thank you, Chair. I will try and make it as exciting as I possibly can for you. So the annual governance statement, you may recall, was presented to yourselves back in June last year, and that forms part of our statement of accounts. It's our self-assessment of how well the organisation was governed during that financial year. So that's for the financial year 2021, and then we draw up an action plan for 21-22, looking at any issues that have been highlighted and managing those. And it shouldn't be a document that is just produced and then left. So we bring you an interim update to let you know how we're getting on with managing those issues. I'd just like to point out at this point in time, as far as the statement of accounts is concerned, the final accounts, no issues have been raised by the external auditors in terms of the annual governance statement and the action plan. But obviously, until we have the final opinion, I can't say that that won't change. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully would be advised by now if it was going to. So the 2 issues that were raised during the review of 2021, one was related to cybersecurity and the other was to partnerships. So looking at the cybersecurity issue, it was raised because not necessarily there is a particular problem at Colchester, but the recognition that nationally and internationally cybersecurity is getting more and more of a concern. Hackers are getting more sophisticated. Processes being used to steal our data and information is becoming more sophisticated. So we've set out for you the actions that we were going to undertake and also where we currently are at the moment. So we're just waiting for the final results of the cyber maturity audit, and I haven't seen the final report from that yet, but I haven't been made aware of any particular issues. And we're also looking at an SIEM system, which is a security information and event management system. Basically, it's a bit of a control tool to ensure that if there are hacks or potential attacks on the organisation, they are picked up and we have very early warning systems in place. What I would say is there is no particular issues at Colchester, and I'll go into a bit more about that when we look at the risk register in the next report. The other item that was highlighted was about partnerships, and obviously the co-working during the pandemic really highlighted for us the importance of our partnership arrangements and working with our partners to deliver critical services to our residents across the borough, especially the NHS and community and voluntary sectors. Our partnerships worked really well, but what we felt was that there should be a review and an informal endorsement of that. So we're undertaking a review of the partnership arrangements, making sure that the ones that we think are strategically important are highlighted and that we're delivering them and meeting our strategic priorities. We're in the process of dealing with those, and I've set out the details there, and that will be reported later on in will probably be reported to yourselves in 21, 22. No, 22, 23. I lose track of the years. So it's whether you had any questions on those 2 issues.
So we have the 2 points and the explanation of what is being done to address them. To take them in order, are there any questions or observations on the first issue of cybersecurity? Not a specific control issue, just a general control issue for all local authorities. So no comment. On the second issue, that is the issue of partnership working. Any observations or comments? Councillor King?
Just to welcome this. It's proved itself to be crucial. It's an area of real strength, I think, for this council, and the times that lie ahead of us, particularly looking towards the health area, regardless of the pandemic, looking at resources to changing national priorities, such as activity and intervention early rather than health treatment later. All of those things are so self-evidently important, but difficult to do well, that I really welcome that. I think the only question, I think, from a chair for me would be whether you'll have a view on what your priorities will be, because implicitly it's going to get you into that. What's going to matter most? That would be useful to hear when you have worked your way through that. But I absolutely welcome this. Thank you.
As a governance committee, I think there are some concerns with partnership working because it is effective and we're being pushed in that direction by government. The money seems to be percolating down to partnerships more than it does to single authorities. And increasingly, the key targets are being delivered by partnerships, which can be difficult. As a governance committee, of course, we're not reviewing we're not scrutinizing our partnerships, although there is an issue of what do we put in, what do we get out, and how effective is it. But I think the more challenging issue is with the more diverse partnership working, how do we ensure that we have sound governance arrangements which are working and effective across several different organizations in a harmonized way, which means we have governance assurance. And I think that is perhaps a bigger challenge to convince ourselves that all the procedures and rules are in place appropriately across many organizations. I know we've asked this question in the past when we have working between ourselves and CBH and so on, and leisure industry and so on. And we've been assured that it does work, but it does seem to be a challenge to ensure that the governance stays in line with the more modern methods of working and service delivery.
And I think that's a part of what the review will pick up, is looking at that framework of governance requirements. The fundamental basis will be our strategic objectives and the arrangements that we have with those partners, and are we meeting those objectives and how we meet them. And actually, you've heard from CCHL tonight, and they've talked about their governance arrangements in the business case, and we are actually getting better at making sure governance is brought in at a very early stage. Historically, we've had partners where we've worked with where those governance arrangements have been brought in later on, and it's much harder to find that reassurance. What we're finding now is we have very much more of a focus on making sure those objectives are set at the very beginning, and we have some measurements in there. So the governance is being built in at the front rather than being brought in when something isn't being delivered in the way that we want it to. But the review will give us a better understanding of how that's working across all of our partnerships, and actually identifying what is crucial for us to be able to deliver those diverse services to our residents. And as you say, going forwards, that partnership working is a huge part of that delivery. It's part of our transformation process. We need to ensure that those partnerships work well.
Any final comments? In that case, can we, the action required is we need to note the work programme being undertaken to implement the current annual governance statement action plan. Do we formally note? Thank you. We then move on to item 10, the risk management progress report on page 97, and back to our corporate governance manager again.
And I'll try and make this one even more exciting than the other one. So in terms of risk management, it's the opposite to the annual governance statement. So the annual governance statement looks back over how we've performed. The risk management process obviously is looking forward to try and identify the areas where there may be concerns and how we can manage those before they manifest into a crisis situation. You're used to me bringing you a regular update, so we bring you one every 6 months, and we bring you an annual one at your July meeting. But this one is the interim 6-monthly review, just setting out the review of the strategic risk register that was undertaken by our senior management team in December, and also a bit of background on the work that we've been doing in the last 6 months in the risk management team. So in terms of the work undertaken, obviously a lot of the physical risk management activity has been about the pandemic still. So it feels like it's been going on for a very long time. And we've been looking at key issues such as our business continuity functions, our key services, emergency planning, health and safety. All of those form part of our risk management framework. So they're our operational side of managing risk. And that's taken quite a lot of time making sure that we are providing our services to our residents and also keeping our staff safe while we're doing that. And in relation to the strategic side, it is that forward planning of operational activities, making sure that we can deliver if we get further waves of COVID, etc., and if we have large numbers of staff being off. So we have revised the format of the strategic risk register in the last year or so, and we've been looking at strengthening the risk management processes. So we're looking at the council's risk appetite and the maturity level of the risk function. So they will be details that I'll bring to you at the year-end report in more detail, but that is reflected in some of the way that we've positioned the strategic risk register. You may recall that quite a few of the members of this committee attended a risk management training session last year. It feels like a long time ago now. I know following on from the year-end report, there was a request for some further training on risk management for some members, and hopefully that was well received. So we ran through risk management, what it meant at Colchester, and the ways that we manage our risks here. We're still providing support to a lot of other groups and organisations. So we do support the SAG, which is the Safety Advisory Group in Colchester, which is made up of a lot of partners delivering events, and also the Community Stadium Safety Advisory Group. And we manage the risk process for our parking partnership and also our joint museums partnership. Following the report in July, we have been to full council, and the risk management strategy that was revised has been adopted, and the policy framework has been updated. So in terms of the review of the strategic risk register, as I say, that was undertaken in December by senior management team, and I've set out in 7.2 5 changes that were made to the risks on the register. So 3 of our risks have gone up and 2 of those risks have gone down. So the ones that have been increased are COVID-19, so that's risk ST4. The impact was increased from 4 from 3 to reflect the infection rates at that point in time. So in December, we were seeing those increases, and it was having much more of an impact on the organisation. That impact hasn't got any worse since December, and I monitor our sickness levels on a daily basis in terms of the impacts on services. We're monitoring those, and we're also working with the Essex Resilience Forum, making sure that we across the board are supporting our health colleagues. At this point in time, I wouldn't say that risk has reduced, but it hasn't increased at all. It will be reviewed at the next review with senior management team. It may be that we can reduce it down then, depending on what's happening nationally. The second risk to be increased was SP3, which is cyber security, which kind of supports the item that was raised in the annual governance statement. Again, with stressing the point that it's not particular to Colchester. We did recognise that one of our very close neighbouring authorities suffered quite a severe cyber attack towards the end of last year. And that kind of highlighted that it's still an issue for us. So the increase just reflects that ability for people to steal the information is getting worse. And what we're saying is the probability has been increased, but the impact hasn't. So the likelihood of an attack being made on Colchester has been increased. That doesn't mean that it will be successful because of obviously the controls that we put in place. The other risk that we increased was SP5, and that was staff wellbeing. And obviously, the continuing impact of the pandemic has had an impact on our staff delivering services, especially the frontline staff who are delivering services to our community. The staff who are responding to the pandemic, in terms of even my own team, delivering the emergency planning and business continuity support to the organisation. And we recognise as an organisation that personal resilience levels are quite low. And we wanted to make sure that we highlighted that, and we actually gave that the level of importance that it has to have. So we've increased that from 3 to 4. So the probability of there being an impact on our staff has gone up. The impact scores have remained the same. We have put things in process, and we are looking at further support for officers and for the organisation as a whole to rebuild some of that resilience. But it wasn't all increases. We managed to reduce 2 of the risks. We reviewed quite clearly some of the issues that we've had at a fairly high level for a little while. One of those is compliance, so SP4, and that will be highlighted in the next report that I'll present to you about the internal audit report. But it's actually the recognition that our internal control systems are operating effectively. There will always be a risk from lack of compliance, but the probability of a breach of compliance we feel is lower, and that's supported by the internal audit reports that are coming through. And the last one that we reduced was financial equality. It's still a key concern for the organisation, and we recognise that our residents of Colchester, there is financial equality in the borough. And what we have done within our customer services team is revised how we've provided some of those services. So we're focusing on financial and employment support for customers. And we can see that that has worked in terms of there's less need for crisis intervention in many cases. And an indicator for that, for us, is our council tax collection rates didn't drop during COVID. We've been able to maintain them. So in terms of that financial ability to meet the council tax payments is still there. And actually we are giving support to the people that need it the most. So we've been able to reduce the impact to 2 from 4. The risks are set out in the risk register for you, and I've also set out in the matrix, which is that the graph showing where all the risks sit on the table. Those that have moved, I've used a little arrow to show you where they've moved from and to give you an understanding of how that's changed. It's whether you have any questions.
I must say I'm very pleased with the continued improvement we have, and the little arrows showing how things have moved is extremely helpful indeed. The explanation is very comprehensive and leaves me with almost no questions to ask. But I'm sure Councillor King, Councillor Burrows wants to kick off. But by all means. And Councillor Bentley and Councillor, everyone. Yes. Okay. Right.
Thank you. It's really exciting to see that Colchester Borough Council places so much importance on the well-being of their members of staff, and it's great that you're putting into action further support to improve the resilience of the staff of Colchester Borough Council. Could you just give me a little bit more information about what that involves exactly, please? Thank you.
I'll just go back to the risk because I can't remember more off the top of my head, so bear with me. We've already have processes in place. So we already have an employment support program where we have a confidential helpline for our staff. So there's a website resource, there's counselling support, all of that is confidential. So we are using those processes and we are highlighting that to staff. We're also looking at implementing an action plan for the people strategy, ensuring that our performance is regularly monitored, not in terms of being upset if performance isn't good. It's recognizing that there's various causes for poor performance or a dip in performance, especially where we have staff who've been performing fantastically. And one of the issues we have is actually not about poor performance, it's about those staff that go the extra mile and continue to do it. So a lot of it is about training our managers to recognise when staff are getting to that stage of burning themselves out because they are committed to providing the services. And actually, that's really what it's about for us. We don't have particular cases of poor performance and people not wanting to do their job. We actually have cases of people wanting to do their job really, really well and actually not taking that step back. So it's putting some processes in place about how we recognise that and giving some tools to our managers to recognise those behaviours. It's not something we're going to be able to do overnight, but we do regular staff surveys to make sure that we understand how our staff feel, and that's all confidential. You don't have to put your details in, so nothing goes back and says, oh, you know, that particular service isn't performing. And also making sure that the employee assistance programme is really rolled out to staff. We've had it for a little while now, and actually members, it was rolled out to members last year as well as part of the review that we undertook. And actually it's about making sure that we reinforce that programme and highlight some of the benefits of it. But obviously as we go through and progress with those details, there'll be more reports on that. And that's part of our internal audit process as well. So we've recently met with the auditors and started to look at the plan for next year. Staff wellbeing is one of the issues that they'll be looking at, and we'll be asking them to actually take that assessment of how well we're managing that process.
Any supplementary?
And I presume, obviously, the managers who are getting all this training, which is fantastic, they are able to dip into the employment assistance scheme and so on.
Yep, the employment assistance scheme is open to every single member of staff, from the chief exec down to everybody. And actually, it's open to their families as well, because it's all confidential. If there's a need within their close family to use that programme, then that's absolutely fine, because it's about that well-being, and we recognise that home life, you can't separate that out from work life sometimes. So if there's that support that we can give, there is no reason that it can't be used by anybody.
Brilliant, thank you. I just think you should be really applauded for that as a borough councillor, for providing that opportunity for the staff.
I couldn't discriminate whether Councillor King or Councillor Bentley got their hand up first, so I shall call upon Councillor Fox next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to ask a question around financial inequality. And it is really good to see in the risk register the work that has gone on in terms of providing support to residents, and it's really clear that has made a difference to them, and that it might be a blunt indicator, but it's a good indicator in terms of council tax collection rates having been maintained throughout the pandemic. I suppose there's an argument that we're about to see a further challenge for residents in terms of them being able to pay bills, in terms of in particular energy prices going up, and the price cap increase there, but also next year, but increases in national insurance and council tax as well. And I just wondered whether there are potentially further work that the council is going to need to do to ensure that we support residents through that process as well.
The customer services team is going through another review of those services required. So they changed how they provided services during COVID to give that support from the employment side and the financial support. They recognise that we've got some really tough issues coming, as a country as a whole, as you quite rightly said, just energy bills alone increasing, and some of those tough decisions that people are having to make. So they're putting their services at the forefront of that in terms of identifying people. We may not necessarily be able to give financial assistance, but what we're trying to do is pick those people up early. So involving working with Colchester Borough Homes, identifying people who may not be aware of the services that either Colchester Borough Homes or Colchester Borough Council can provide, and actually targeting them and actually giving them information about where they can go and signposting them for support. And I think there is that huge recognition that this is not an issue that's going to go away, so it will continue to be monitored.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I was willingly deferring, as I always do, to the Leader of the County Council. But I just want to sort of say two things. One's been touched on. Thank you, Adam, about the concerns we all have about what's coming our way and therefore what's going to impact those who may struggle. And actually at the County Council today, we had a conversation which, or acknowledged between us, that the analysis shows 3 in 10 households struggle to have decent standard of living, and 7 in 10 single parent families. So we know for lots of people that the margin between kind of managing and not is, is a tight old thing. And for whatever the reasons, that won't be helped. That won't be helped by what we know is coming, inflation and everything else. So I'm only repeating it, but just to say there is awareness more widely, and I know, Kevin, you care about this a lot as well. So with that, I just say 2 brief things. First of all, this is great work on the specifics. And secondly, they're doing risk management well. And I've bored everybody else on this before, but the members of the GNA do change. That's good. I've seen risk management done lots of places in my working life, and often it's not done very well at all. This feels real, and I know that it's used. So, congratulations to you and your colleagues at DEW. You need to keep doing that. That's what keeps us honest and on our toes. So, thank you.
Councillor Bentley.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Chair, and I would concur with all the comments made by Councillor King there, absolutely. And also particularly on the point, well, not particularly, but as well on the point about good risk management. I think this is done exceptionally well here. Any risk management is taking the pulse of an organisation at one particular time and how you are doing and how you're achieving. And we do it very well here. And also that I think the great benefit of all documents written by any local government is that they need to be understood by the people we represent. If we just write reports for each other, that is utterly pointless. And this is laid out, like so many at Colchester Borough Council, so very well. So I absolutely want to say that to you and your team, that this is a vital piece of work, because we can carry on just doing stuff thinking it's okay. You need this to tell you whether it is okay. Now, I just wanted to talk about, or ask a question, really, not talk about, just how often this is updated. So I'm just taking it for instance, because I generally don't know, on the COVID work, which is absolutely accurate as this is written. But as things stand, things appear to be, I wouldn't say okay, but better than perhaps anticipated with Omicron. And it appears to be life is getting a bit better. And of course, we wait to see what the government's going to do at the end of this month with restrictions. And I just wondered how often this is updated to reflect that. Is it a monthly thing, or is it every 6 months you will do that? Because that's a fast moving thing. So this is absolutely accurate as written. I just wondered, would you in a month's time take another look and see how that's affecting society generally and our services, but also our staff too? That is also a very important point. It was raised earlier, a very important point. Throughout all of this pandemic, both the NHS and local government has picked up the work, as it often does in this country, to deliver for people and keep things going. And it's a bit like, isn't it, you never expect your doctor to be ill. It's one of those things, isn't it? It's, we expect services to carry on, and they have right across local government superbly. And I think it's important that we see how the staff are feeling, and I think it's a very honest assessment. And so well done for that too. And there's no harm in saying what's been said. I just wondered whether that will be looked at as improving or not, as the case may be, and another honest assessment done. Thank you, Chair.
So in terms of how regularly we review the risks, I go and report to our senior management team every quarter. So it's at least once every 3 months. If there is something that is critical in the meantime, I'll be having a conversation with the Chief Operating Officer, and we'll be dealing with whatever issue that it is. Yeah, he's used to me moaning at him. No, asking questions, asking difficult questions occasionally, and highlighting any concerns that come up, and obviously as part of our internal audit. framework as well, and our internal controls, any particular issues would be highlighted quite quickly. But it's every quarter. So I will go to senior management team. I will have that conversation with them. I will ask them some of those difficult questions. I'll also ask them to demonstrate some of the results. So we talk about the mitigating actions, and in terms of our internal audit programme, we include a lot of those strategic risks in the audit programme coming up. So, as I say, we're looking at the moment for next year's internal audit programme. We have part of it is set, so we have a view of what we want to cover over 5 years, but we look at any particular issues and any risks on the register that really need that endorsement and review. For example, staff wellbeing is something we've picked up and we've added it to the internal audit programme for next year. So we have that external review to make sure that we are complying with the mitigating actions that senior management team tell me that we are doing. And obviously I do some work myself just to make sure.
No more. Right. Thank you for that very useful presentation. My only comment, having listened to our debate here, is that there are sort of two issues which are being almost concatenated. One is an issue of importance, and that is the financial safety nets which we are offering to those people in the borough who need our support to ensure that they can pay their council tax and in fact get on with their lives. And the issue of risk, which is the probability that things don't go as we'd planned them to go. And I think touching on the matter of financial safety nets is a very responsible thing for us to do this evening, because it's essential that is done. It's an important activity. But in terms of the risks, the things that are likely to go wrong in our processes, we've identified the projects for recovery from COVID, the council funding, and the extent to which our wish for activities might exceed our resource capability, cybersecurity, and staff well-being. And those four areas, I think, are correctly identified as those areas where there is sort of significant probability of things going wrong unless we take extreme corrective action. So we are asked, in terms of our decisions, to consider and comment on the Council's progress and performance in managing risk, which we have done for the period April to September, and it is, as was indicated, an interim review, and to consider and comment on the current strategic risk register, where we're saying, yes, the top 4 issues have been correctly identified. So is it your wish that we note the report on that basis? Thank you, colleagues.
I was going to say yes. Sorry, I was going to say yes, Chair, so I didn't catch your eye. We should do that, but I hope we reflect the fact that we think this is an excellent way of monitoring, and actually Colchester Borough Council does it very well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, so we'll add the caveat, the applaud to the to our resolution. Then moving on to item 11, the mid-year internal audit assurance report. I have a personal comment which might well be addressed in the officer's presentation. Things look very good on the surface, with our new auditors giving all but one of the audits a top mark of substantial assurance and no high priority urgent recommendations at all. And I just wonder whether this is like the GCSE results, where we get grade drift every year, better performance, but in fact the standards of education remain more or less constant. So I wonder whether that point can be addressed in your report, Hayley.
Of course, Chair, and I understand your concerns. So the report is set out from you, as you quite rightly said. It's provided by TIA, our internal audit providers. It's our mid-year report, so we're halfway through the internal audit year. And what we find always is there's a slight imbalance in the number of audits carried out each half year. Because we need to provide reassurance for the final accounts, quite a lot of our key financial systems are audited towards the second half of the year. So we'd always see slightly fewer in the first half, but we are complying with our plan. And I've spoken to them recently about the audits that are still to be carried out this financial year, and we're on target to achieve them all. It's been difficult for our internal audit providers because they actually started as COVID hit. So we changed providers on the 1st of April 2020. They actually haven't visited our offices yet. So that they haven't actually met our staff in person, apart from when they came in for the interviews prior to the contract starting. They haven't been able to meet people in person. However, they have been able to get some really good relationships with key staff, and they are providing some really pertinent internal audit reports. There is a concern, and it's a concern that I've already raised with the Chief Operating Officer in terms of, I'm a bit of a pessimist, so I don't like it being too good. And it always kind of, is that an issue? And, you know, as a good auditor, you should always check to make sure that on the surface, it's not just hiding something a bit more difficult. However, we've had some conversations. So the Chief Operating Officer and I met with TIA last week, and we had this very same conversation about, we've got some really good audit reports. Everything here is coming out as substantial, which under our previous provider would have been classed as full assurance audits. And those that have been on the committee for some time will know that, you know, we might have had 3 or 4 full assurance audits in a year. So there is that bit of concern of, are we hitting the right areas? Are we looking at the right things? And actually, when we've spoken to the auditors, they are very aware of some of the key issues. They have given us that reassurance that the information they've been given and what they've been looking at actually does mean that we're providing some really good functions. And our internal controls are operating correctly. Now, what we'll find is quite a few of the audits, because they have to provide reassurance for the final accounts, are done year on year. We always try and look at a different area of a system. So, for example, payroll will be reviewed every year because it's a huge financial cost going through the organisation. So as part of the final accounts, we have to verify that. And we will try and pick a different area of the payroll to look at each year. But because it's historical, those issues that were picked up originally have been resolved. People are aware of the controls that should be in place in the system. And we're also moving to much more automated systems. So whereas before you would have that human influence sometimes and that ability for a human to influence a process, because of that moving COVID to virtual working, we were able to put some automated processes in place where those controls are built in. So I'm reassured that actually we're not particularly missing anything. What I would say is internal audit is never perfect. You're only looking at certain things. We can't look at every transaction of the authority. So I can never give you 100% reassurance that there is nothing that we've missed, either a mistake or even from a fraudulent point of view. I can't give you that assurance. No internal auditor would. But from the details that we have and the evidence that we've seen, we are confident that our processes are working correctly. And I think it is an indication actually of some of that working by our officers, as we were talking about in the risk report, in terms of that desire from our staff to deliver those services and deliver them well. So I think it's always hard to say that we haven't missed something. I can never give you that assurance, but I think I'm confident to say we are looking in the right areas. We are asking those difficult questions, and I am asking the auditors to look at particular areas. And we are working with the assistant directors to identify areas of concern. And I think another indication for me is that we have managers in the organisation who will now come to me and say that they feel that maybe their process isn't working as well as it could do. So they will come and they'll say, well, I'm not sure we've got this quite right. Can you have a look at it? There is no point me sending in the internal auditors to look at a system we know is not working correctly. So I would rather work with those officers. I'd rather have an environment where they feel comfortable highlighting a concern. We work with them, we look at how we can improve that process. And once we've got that process working as we think it should do, we send in the auditors to confirm that that's the case. I could ask the auditors to go and look at a system when a manager has highlighted there's a concern, but that will just mean that they will tell us what we already know, and it will be reported through to yourselves as an issue in the organisation, when actually I think we want to encourage managers to identify those things. We don't want to push them underground. So I think for me, that's also an indication that I've got more people telling me when they have a concern rather than waiting for an auditor to come in and find it.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much for that, Hayley. And it's really good to hear you talking about that that extra interrogation that is going on to ensure that the report stands up. One of the things I was interested in was around where we might be automating services and processes more fully, and to a certain extent, taking out the opportunity for human error can ensure that a process is much more secure. I just wondered whether the auditors have the skills and the ability to really interrogate some of those processes. So I'm thinking about whether some of those processes might be programmed into systems using algorithms, and whether the auditors can actually go into the detail and check that they are performing as they should, so that and it's not just a cursory review of a system to check that a process is being followed.
That was one of the areas we asked to review as part of the tender process when we appointed the auditors, was how would they actually carry out the audits, what sort of information would they look at, and the quantity and the quality. And actually what we're finding, especially with TIA, is they have very sophisticated computer systems, and they actually use their own algorithms. So we download data into their system. It's very secure. There's no issue in terms of losing data or anything like that. But they are able to take a lot larger sample, put it through their system, and identify with the algorithms whether there's any issues. So the actual technical expertise of the auditors has increased in terms of being able to do that deeper dive into the information that we're providing. And we do ask them to provide us with examples of that. So when we look, we can ask to see any of the details behind the audits. We can ask to see what sample size they've used, what sort of issues they've looked at, and how that's happened. But they actually use technology to do it now, as opposed to a human being.
Thanks very much. It's really good to hear.
Can I ask whether on any of the audits that are reported here, of the 10, whether any of the issues raised by Councillor Fox, artificial intelligence or algorithms taking a subjective view as opposed to an objective view of a process, like looking at benefits fraud, which isn't actually one of the audits carried out, whether we can sort of have an example of how automation is audited. Unfortunately, it isn't one of the audits we're looking at today, but it might be interesting to bring at some time in the future a report on how artificial intelligence is used to detect either sort of COVID grant fraud or benefits fraud, with a degree of sort of reliability in the way Councillor Fox was questioning.
Of course, I mean, obviously it's far more technical than I have details here at the moment. But the second half of the year, the benefits audit will be carried out. That's one of the financial systems that we have to leave to later on in the year. And what I can do is when I bring the year-end report to you, is actually ask the auditors to come along and give you a little bit of a summary of how they've carried out that audit. So the systems that they use, the processes they use, and some of that detail behind it to give you that understanding of how those audits are actually carried out. Would that help?
Oh, delighted to attend, and I'm sure Councillor Fox would also wish to accept that very kind offer, and any other members of the committee. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you for guiding us through the issue of the audit standards. The decisions are fairly open to review and comment, and I think we've reviewed comment and we've got a little training course set for us to go on. So no specific decisions required there other than noting. That takes us on to item 12, the annual review of business continuity on page 133. Floor is yours again.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll be pleased to know this is the last one from me, so you won't have to put up with me for much longer. Business continuity, we touched on it in the risk management report. It's part of our risk management framework and provides some of that operational reassurance about provision of our services. It's not something that there is a formal requirement to bring a report to this committee, but we feel it's good practice for you to be able to review the business continuity work that's undertaken to provide you with that reassurance that we do consider how we would provide our services if we had a crisis situation. I think probably it's easy to say that the last 18 months to 2 years has been a really good test of our business continuity plans. If we're doing a tabletop exercise, that was a really good one. And it has shown us some areas where we need to perhaps change our plans or revise our assumptions on how our services are provided and what's actually needed. So we set out for you in the report a little bit of background to business continuity and also a summary of the work that we've undertaken. And I have to say that obviously the COVID situation has taken up a lot of that work for our resilience officer in terms of supporting services and sometimes supporting services very quickly to change and adapt to situations that are occurring, especially for, suddenly increasing rates or issues that are arising from the Essex Resilience Forum in terms of how we need to respond and help our partners. We work with senior management teams, so our first call officer group, it's known as, which is basically our senior management team, and they actually provide that 24-hour support out of hours for the organisation if there's a key issue. There will be a senior manager who is on call to be able to deal with any issue that's occurring. So the pandemic has highlighted for us how important it is for services to have plans that are up to date and tested and actually exercised, because we, as I say, we make some assumptions about how we will respond to things and how our officers will respond. And actually we don't know for sure how that will happen until we exercise the plans. So our resilience officer has been reviewing and testing the plans and throughout the pandemic, revising them and reviewing what's important, which services are important, which ones are critical. And some of that's been updated in the strategy, which I'll come on to in a minute. So we've looked at specific business impact assessments for critical services. Now that's more of a deep dive into what is it that actually will impact those services, what is critical. So we have to identify what services are critical to Colchester and our residents and our customers. And then we look to what is really critical, what's really going to interrupt those services and mean that we can't provide them. And that gives us a focus then on our recovery processes, so we can put those plans in place that when something occurs, if something occurs, we can respond to it quite quickly. We're rolling out an online course, so obviously the pandemic has helped with all that virtual environment. So we used to do one face-to-face training. We're now developing an e-learning course that all officers will be encouraged to take that course to give them an understanding of their role in business continuity, because it does affect every single member of staff. We have had some other issues in terms of non-COVID events during the first half of the year. So the fuel plan, you may remember, it's some time ago now, back in September, when there was the fuel crisis, and actually we have a plan to invoke if and when that occurs. So it had happened a few years ago when we looked at that originally then. We invoked that fuel plan, we revised it slightly, so we worked out which of our vehicles and services were critical and how we would have access to fuel when it was becoming in short supply elsewhere. And we are continuing to monitor that situation. And I think, looking back at September, it was a culmination of panic buying. It was just there wasn't a particular concern. There was a little bit of a fuel shortage, but because there was a little bit, that snowballed into everybody filling up, and that short term where we couldn't find the fuel. We're also looking about goods supply, as we're all aware that there are shortages in goods. So it seems to be getting better than it was, but we need to ensure that we can identify quite early on any impacts that might have on the council. Now, it sounds quite a bit strange, because how many goods do we actually buy in? And we could say, yes, we have, waste collection items, etc. But it's not necessarily just about those items that you can see. It's about the impact that it has on things like building contracts. So this is a little bit of the risk management side, in terms of we may have a quote to do some works, but because of the supply chain issues, what we're finding is when we actually deliver those works, the budget that we've put aside is not sufficient. So we're monitoring that situation to identify those impacts. And I'm pleased to say that our resilience officer passed the Certificate of Business Continuity Institute examination, which means that they are able to further embed the business continuity framework. So they have that formal qualification now to give them those extra tools to ensure that our business continuity processes are appropriate. We have reviewed the business continuity strategy for 2022. Again, there is no formal requirement for us to have a business continuity strategy. It doesn't form part of the policy framework like the risk management strategy. However, it is good practice, and it sets the framework for the organisation on how we manage those issues going forwards, and the expectations we have on members and officers about business continuity, and also looking at setting out our strategic objectives and our critical services. And it's whether you have any questions.
Can I start off with a question about whether we should have one plan or two plans? I'm listening to your presentation. There are certain business continuity issues which come about via a slow degradation, such as the absence of fuel, such as an increasing number of staff being off with COVID, so that it becomes more obvious that we cannot continue providing services in the way we want, and service degrades. But there are different class of disasters altogether, like losing all our communication capability between our office and our cloud server, where a whole job lot just vanishes in one go as a really significant disaster. A flood, overnight we find our buildings are flooded. Can the same plan realistically deal with both those type of issues, or should we have sort of two plans?
We actually have several plans. So we have a corporate overall business continuity plan for the council. Now, quite rightly, that's quite high level, because we cannot deal with every single scenario under that plan. So the high level plan sets out the critical services, sets out the key risks, sets out the key actions and the roles and responsibilities for business continuity. So it follows on from the strategy and setting that out with all the detail in it. So the strategy sets out the framework, the corporate plan sets out the detail. Underneath that corporate plan, we then have individual service plans for the critical services. So each service will look at their particular area and they will look at their needs and requirements, because we might have an issue that only impacts on one service as opposed to being the whole organisation. We then look at it from a different point of view. So if you like, we slice the cake a different way. So going from each individual service and their delivery, we look at the impacts. Now in the business continuity world, there are some key areas that you must consider. One of those is staff, the other is buildings, and the other is technology. So those are the key issues, because they're the fundamental basis for delivering any service. So yes, we might have some vehicles as well, but those areas we actually have specific plans for. So for example, Rowan House, we have a Rowan House business continuity plan. The pandemic has changed that plan dramatically, because buildings now aren't so key to delivering our services, and actually COVID for us was fantastic in terms of being able to deliver a service from anywhere in the world, basically, because we're all connected now. So that side isn't so critical, but the employee side, the actual staff to deliver the service, and the technology. So there is an IT specific plan. We then look at other critical issues. So we already had a flu pandemic plan prior to COVID. And we've had a flu pandemic plan for some years, and we look at those key issues, and actually that can be applied to any situation where you have a large number of staff off at the same time. We also have, let's say, the fuel plan and various others where there is a key critical function, but there's not just one or two. We have a set of them, but we can't cover every single scenario. So a lot of it is about the recognition that the decision-making process will happen when the incident occurs. So the fundamentals, that the framework is there in terms of it might be relevant to a loss of building or a loss of IT or a loss of staff, but the actual decisions and what we need to do will vary depending on the situation. So if the issue is it's a major flood and we can't get staff into work or deliver a service, is very different to the loss of a building and not being able to deliver the service from there. And that's where the first call officer group comes in. They have regular training every other month. We go through the plans, we look at the key risks for business continuity, and we work with them in terms of the processes. We have very set processes of decision making, so it's very clear. We set out a process for how we make decisions and how we record them. So later on, when we review what we did and how we responded, there is a clear record of that. But yeah, there's quite a few plans out there, but we can't cover everything.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bentley, Councillor Fox.
Thank you. It'll be very brief. So again, rather like the risk register, this is so critically important for any well-run organisation of business continuity. My question is a little bit looking forward, but we talk about the fuel in this, which is very important to make sure we can maintain our vehicles. I just wondered, given of course this authority declared a climate emergency, at what point does that fuel become hydrogen or electric, and is that part of the planning? Because if we don't take a lead, no one else is going to follow.
Absolutely, and we're already looking at using electric vehicles. We're already trialling that, looking to see how we can actually incorporate electric vehicles into our fleet going forwards, and whether it has the capability, but it's looking at other resources and doing away with the fuel.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if this question sort of stretches a little wider than business continuity, but it was playing on my mind when we were talking about staff wellbeing in the risk register as well, and it's an issue that I think we probably need to take seriously, because you also mentioned that we can deliver our services from anywhere in the world, and there are some services that can't be delivered from anywhere in the world. If I stick my waste collection outside the front of my house, it needs to be collected from there, and it needs at least at the moment a human to do that. But there are staff, and I think an increasingly number of staff, that don't live in the borough or anywhere near it. But local government is organised on the basis that place matters, that Colchester matters as an entity. And I just wonder the extent to which there are both upsides and downsides to staff not having a connection to the borough. Now there may be potential, risks or business continuity issues if there are staff, a significant distance away from Colchester. But I just wonder if you're not living, visiting, or working in Colchester, to what extent you can provide the highest quality service that we'd want as an organisation.
I think that's a difficult one for me to answer, and I think I would defer to the Chief Operating Officer on that. I think that's more his department than mine.
So I'm not sure my GCSE philosophy will suit me for this one, but I think I'll take the point, Councillor Fox. We have a number of staff. I wouldn't say it's a huge proportion, but certainly some of our managers who aren't based within the borough, or might be in fact overseas. Most are, certainly. And I think I certainly wouldn't say there's any indication that any of those staff that aren't local in any way perform to a lesser extent or to any degree aren't delivering the outcomes we would expect. In fact, some are going above and beyond. And I think it's an interesting one to debate, perhaps for a future occasion. We could think about the broader implications, but it is the economy we're working in now. Of course, there's been some huge structural changes to the economy and the way people work and the way organisations like the council recruit and retain staff. So we need to, I think, be open-minded to all of that. But yeah, take your point. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate your answer.
Any further comments? In that case, the action required is that we endorse the business continuity strategy for 2022, and none of our questioning has indicated in any way that there's anything defective with the strategy. It seems absolutely fit for purpose. So do we agree to endorse? Thank you. And that takes us on to the last item, which is the work programme. Matthew, any changes for the last meeting of the civic year?
No, Chair, there are no changes. So unless members wish to add anything or try and remove anything from the last meeting, work programme is just there to be noted as is. Thank you.
So no changes, we continue as to the plan. Can I thank you for your attendance this evening? It is a bit cold, it is a bit drafty, but we had some really important issues which we needed to address. It's a difficult room to hold a meeting, but thanks to the skills of our audio colleagues, I think most of the meeting has been crystal clear, with the exception of the Zoom. Let's blame it on the Americans. With the exception of the Zoom, now those of us who spent their formative years communicating on military radios had no difficulty whatsoever with the earlier part of the meeting, but I do take it that it was just a little difficult for those who've not had that experience in their younger years. But I think in future meetings, we will just have to check that we are paying the top premium for Zoom and getting their best quality audio and not the rubbish quality. So thank you for your attendance. Safe journey home. Close the meeting.